She didn't shout. She didn't break a sweat. Jasmine Crockett calmly dismantled Trump's talking points on live TV and left the room speechless. It was already the most watched debate of the year. Not because anyone expected real policy to break through the noise, but because people knew something unpredictable might happen. That's how these nights work now. A spectacle, a performance. And somewhere in that swirl of lights, rehearsed applause lines, and carefully moderated chaos, sat Jasmine Crockett, quiet, still, watching. She'd been underestimated before, written off as too new, too bold, or just too much. But tonight, she wasn't here for validation. She wasn't here for clips or zingers. She had something to say, and she'd been waiting. Across from her stood Donald Trump, still commanding a loyal base, still speaking in sweeping statements that made headlines before the fact-checkers. "We've got to go tougher. Way tougher," he said, pacing slightly, hands carving the air like he was conducting a symphony of certainty. "China's been eating our lunch. These tariffs? They're how we take back control. We bring jobs home. We stop the bleeding. No more free rides," he added with that familiar smirk, like anyone who disagreed just didn't get it. Jasmine's eyes didn't flinch. She glanced down once at her notepad. Just once. But the rest of the time, she kept her eyes forward. Listening. Calculating. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room yet, but she was about to be the most important. On screen, the camera cut to her as Trump continued. "I don't care what the so-called experts say. Tariffs protect Americans. Period. You think the people in Toledo or Bakersfield care about global trade balances? No. They care about jobs." A few scattered claps met his words before that heavy, waiting silence fell. The moderator tried to shift to the next topic, something about infrastructure, but Crockett leaned in, not rushed, not interrupting, just precise. "With all due respect," she said, the mic picking up her voice with perfect clarity, "I've got to respond to that." The moderator hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Go ahead, Congresswoman Crockett." She didn't raise her voice, didn't posture. Her tone was clean, clipped, like someone tired of playing pretend. "Mr. Trump," she said, turning toward him, "you say tariffs protect Americans. But which Americans are you talking about? In my district," she continued, "we've got families spending $20 more every week at the grocery store. We've got a furniture plant in Greenville, Texas, that laid off 32 workers last month. Their CEO told me raw materials are costing more because of your last round of tariffs. And now you want to double down?" The room shifted. You could feel it in the stillness, like someone finally poked a hole in the polished script. Trump opened his mouth, probably ready with a comeback, but she kept going. "And let me tell you about Miss Bernice Ray," she said. 74 years old, diabetic, lives off a monthly check. She came to my office last week in tears. Her insulin is now 60% more expensive because one of the key components is imported, and your trade games have made it harder to get. So no, she doesn't feel protected. She didn't look at the camera. She looked at him. Trump's expression didn't change right away, but the pause in his body language was noticeable, like he hadn't expected her to come with specifics. She didn't wait for permission to keep going. It's easy to talk about jobs from a stage. It's harder to listen to people who don't have one anymore because your policies made it impossible to stay open. That hush came again, not because they didn't care, but because something real was cutting through. Trump blinked once, maybe twice, but then reached for the mic with a practiced hand, brushing off her words with a short chuckle. "Look, I get it. I really do. She's emotional. She's passionate. That's great. But we've got to think bigger than one factory or one story." That was it. Crockett turned slightly toward the crowd, jaw set but voice steady. "This isn't about one story. This is about patterns, about lives being turned inside out by decisions made in rooms like this, by people who will never have to sit with someone like Miss Ray and explain why insulin now costs more than her rent." Somewhere in the audience, someone let out a low not loud, but real. Trump tried again, pivoting. "We can't let China walk all over us. Everybody knows that. We've been getting scammed for years. The American worker deserves better, and that means standing up strong, even if it stings a little in the short term. Crockett leaned back slightly in her chair and waited. When he finished, she brought the mic up again. You keep saying short term, but short for who? People in positions like yours? Or people like that single mom in Longview who told me she's been cutting her daughter's asthma medication in half just to stretch it across the month? Even the moderator looked up. This isn't theory, Crockett continued. It's not a headline or a soundbite. These are people who are already holding their breath. They don't have a cushion. They don't have a backup plan. Every decision made up here, they're the ones who pay for it. Trump shifted his weight, and for the first time, he didn't jump to respond. She took the opening. You mentioned Bakersfield earlier. I've talked to workers out there, too. You know what they told me? That the tariffs didn't bring their jobs back. Their factories are still closed, but now their groceries are more expensive and their rent's gone up. Well, that's California, he began. That's not. No, Crockett shot back firm. That's America. Just because it's inconvenient doesn't make it less true. He tried to smile, but it didn't land. Not this time. You've made a career of talking over people, she added, facing him squarely. But I'm not one of your rallies. I'm not here to play into your rhythm. I came here to speak for people who can't afford to show up in this room. She paused, long enough for the words to land. The room shifted. That tension crackled. The moderator jumped in. Let's keep the discussion civil. It is civil, Crockett replied. It's just uncomfortable. And sometimes that's exactly what it needs to be. No one argued. Trump glanced at the moderator, then back at her, searching for a line to reclaim the moment, or a way to make her look small. But it wasn't working. He leaned toward the mic again, slight scoff in his voice. You know, I've dealt with a lot of people who like to talk tough. But the reality is, if we kept doing things your way, China would own us by now. You talk about insulin and groceries, but that's not tariffs. That's mismanagement. That's inflation. That's bad leadership. Jasmine didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, expression unreadable, but you could almost feel the fire building behind her eyes. Then, without looking at anyone else, she spoke. You keep saying the word reality, but the reality I live in doesn't have boardrooms or golf resorts. The people I represent work double shifts, then go home and help their kids with homework by flashlight because the lights got cut off. There was that hush again, the kind earned. You say it's inflation, she continued. But inflation didn't start this. A broken system did. And your tariffs? They were just lighter fluid on the fire. It's not just about China. It's about choices. The ones made without understanding what it means to live paycheck to paycheck. Trump shook his head. That's just not true. Tariffs are one of the strongest tools we have. Reagan used them. Eisenhower used them. She blinked slowly. You want to talk about protecting American businesses? Then come with me to Brownwood, a small company that made custom kitchen cabinets, had to shut down because their lumber costs tripled. They weren't scamming anyone. They weren't outsourcing. They just couldn't keep up. Those were American jobs. American workers gone. Trump opened his mouth, but she kept going. And you know what the owner told me? He said, I voted for him twice, and I still lost everything. That man wasn't a Democrat. He wasn't some liberal talking point. He believed you, and now he's selling tools online just to pay the mortgage. You could feel the emotional shift. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. Trump glanced at the moderator again, but Jasmine spoke first. Mr. Trump, you say I'm being emotional, but that's because I care. I care enough to listen, to ask, to show up. You don't have to agree with me, but don't dismiss me because I bring more than applause lines. The moderator looked unsure whether to interrupt again. Just when the tension peaked, Crockett leaned closer to her mic and dropped it. You're protecting profits, not people. And families in my district can't eat political slogans. Instant gasps gave way to applause, then a standing reaction from a corner of the crowd that hadn't made a sound all night. Trump's mouth tightened, just the smallest twitch. Not rage, not irritation, just the flicker of knowing he'd been outplayed. He chuckled, forced. Very dramatic. Very TV-friendly. Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't have to. The room was doing it for her. The moderator cleared his throat, trying to regain structure. Let's move on to the next topic. But even as the debate pressed forward, the energy had changed. Journalists typed like mad. Producers whispered behind the stage. In living rooms across the country, people replayed what they'd just heard. By the time the debate ended, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just trending, she was everywhere. Clips of her line, "Families in my district can't eat political slogans," were pinned to top news sites. Split-screen edits juxtaposed her calm delivery with Trump's blinking and cuffling fiddling. Social media exploded. Backstage, Crockett's team huddled around a muted monitor. Her chief of staff, Ramona Fells, scrolled through their internal feed. She hit harder than we expected. One aide whispered. Ramona smirked. She didn't hit. She landed. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat quietly, sipping cold water while makeup dabbed her cheek. She wasn't celebrating. Not yet. I said what needed to be said, she murmured to Ramona. It's just, I don't know if it matters. We've seen people speak up before. Doesn't always change anything. Ramona crouched beside her. Jazz, you didn't just speak up. You made it real. You said what half the country has been screaming at their TV for years. And you said it in a room where people finally had to hear it. Jasmine nodded, but stayed focused on the post-debate wrap-ups. One conservative panelist, Derek Slade, admitted on the post-show panel, I didn't expect much from Crockett tonight, but she had command. That wasn't a gimmick. She came with facts, stories, and she controlled the room. Another agreed. She connected in a way we haven't seen in years. That Brownwood moment? It's going to replay all week. Ramona turned to Jasmine. You're watching this, right? Jasmine gave a half smile. I just want people to pay attention, not to me, but to them. Outside, crowds formed waiting for her. They weren't asking about Trump's comments anymore. They wanted her. Back home, people watched from diners, late-night shift break rooms, and living rooms. A gas station clerk in Waco played the clip for a coworker. A night nurse in Shreveport pulled it up between rides. A retired steelworker in Mobile, who hadn't voted in years, muttered, well, she's got some fire. 3 days later, Jasmine Crockett was back in her district, standing under a gray sky at an open-air market in Corsicana. No podium, no entourage, just her and volunteers handing out food drive flyers. A woman in a cowboy hoodie asked, You the one from TV? Jasmine smiled. You sure said a mouthful, the woman laughed. My brother don't agree with you on much, but at least you didn't lie to our face. That's gotta count for something. Jasmine stayed another hour, listening. A man said he might register again after watching her. A retired nurse shared her story of lost savings after her husband's plant closed. 2 teens told her they'd used her line in a school debate. Can't eat slogans. One grinned. Mic drop. That night, Jasmine got texts from old friends, journalists, even a former Republican representative. Didn't think I'd say this, but you were the only grown-up on that stage. She stared out the car window. This wasn't about fame. She'd spoken on record 100 times with no audience. Now people were finally paying attention. Her team met, no pizza, no celebration, just strategy. Transcripts lay on the table. People want to know what's next, Ramona said. Jasmine leaned in. We're not starting anything. We're continuing what's been ignored. These stories have always been here. We just need to keep the pressure on. Someone asked if she'd run nationally. She shook her head. I'm not doing this for show. We don't need a banner. We need action. Real wins. Let's go district by district, state by state. Get more folks telling the truth, not just making noise. Across the country, community organizers quoted her in town halls. Local leaders opened meetings with debate clips. On college campuses, students played her exchange as a model of representation. More than anything, she gave people permission to speak, to challenge, to demand more from those in power. 1 week later, she spoke at a Waco community center about housing legislation. A mechanic approached afterward. "Keep fighting. You make it feel like someone actually sees us." That was the point. Crockett never claimed to have all the answers, but she had the courage to speak clearly where most spoke carefully. She didn't raise her voice to compete. She raised it to be understood. In 100 towns like hers, people listened, not because she shouted the loudest, but because she told the plainest truth. Truth doesn't always trend, but when it does, it's our job to do something with it. If you're watching and wondering whether your voice matters, remember Jasmine Crockett. Speak up, stay sharp, and hold the mic when it counts.